So we want to break this up into more components. Before we do that, it'd be nice to understand a little more of what's going on right now. What's this export business at the bottom? And for that matter, if I look at index.js, how's all this import stuff work? So for a very long time, oh man, I've had my microphone down there. For a very long time, there was no way in JavaScript to include one JavaScript file in another. You had to just put script tags in the HTML for everything. There are some third-party libraries that attempted to solve this in various ways. But with ES6, there's finally a standard way, and that is through ES6 modules. So we're using modules here, and this is the syntax. Import whatever from whatever. So these two things that we're importing, notice if I hover over it, it tells me where it's coming from. So it's coming from node module /type/react/index. So these modules that are just listed in quotes like that, those are things that are in the node modules folder. So my third-party dependencies. These that have paths, those are files that are in the actual project. So dot meaning the current directory, right? So ./app is going to look for a file named app in the current directory, the same directory as index.js. And if you're importing a JavaScript file, that's implied. You don't have to say .js, but that's really what's being imported here, is app.js. And it's being imported as app. So app's what I'm referring to it locally, but I could call that anything. I call that pancake breakfast. Call it pancake breakfast down here. Totally works. Still fine. Now that's ridiculous, so I'm not going to, but I wanted to make the point that I could if I wanted to. So what is it importing when it imports that? Well, that depends on what we're exporting. So at the bottom here, I say export default app. So app in this case refers to our class. That's what we named our component, and that's what we're exporting at the bottom. Export default means that's what's going to get imported if you write it this way. So it's being exported as app here, but we can import it as anything we want because it's the default export. So React is the default export from React. Now, if you look at the imports at the top of app.js, though, you'll notice that we're not just importing React from React. We're importing component as well. React doesn't have curly braces around it, so that's the default export from React. So component is a named export. Named exports you put inside parentheses. If you have more than one of them, separate them by a comma. So we could export something other than just our app component here. I could say export const lunch equals twamages. And then in index.js, I could import app and lunch. And in that case, the name matters. It's not the default export, so I need to know which export I'm getting, so I have to use the same name. I could still rename it if I wanted to by using the word as. So import lunch as breakfast. Then I could refer to that as breakfast inside this file. Now, I never eat lunch as breakfast. I eat breakfast for lunch sometimes, but because that's delicious. Breakfast for dinner, also totally legit. So named exports and default exports. To import a default export, you just say import that thing from the library or the file. For named export, you put the name inside curly braces. For default imports, you can name them whatever you want. For named imports, you need to use the name they used, but you can still rename it using as. So that's how this works. That's how this is all working so far. Now, what change did I actually make here? Nothing on purpose. Oh, I just put a line break in there. Yeah. I like to do that, actually. I like to put a line break between things that I'm importing from node modules and things that I'm importing from files from this actual project. All right, questions about that? We'll see a lot more examples.